My father was gone. Between the time my mom left to pick me up from school and the time we got home, he just vanished. I was 8 years old. No one would tell me what was going on. They just scooped me up, took me a few hundred yards up the street to my grandfather's house, put me to bed as soon as it was dark. And as I lay there watching siren lights dance across the ceiling, I wondered, what was the worst thing that could have happened? And I realized the worst thing was actually just never knowing what happened at all. Early 1990s, rural Alabama really was a place where a parent could tell their kid, I'm gonna go get me a beer, never come home again. I didn't want to be one of those kids. And that's a big feeling for an 8-year-old. So I gave it to God. I crawled out of bed, put my 2 skinny knees on the floor, put my face in my hands, and I prayed, God, please let me know what happened to Dad, dead or alive. The next morning, I raced out the bedroom at first light, met my grandfather at the edge of his kitchen with a coffee cup in his hand. Is he alive? Is he alive? No, he's dead. He hung himself out in the woods. And there's really not a worse moment in my life. Just the most perfect despair I have ever felt, but also the most perfect guilt. Because I'd realized I'd killed my father by how I prayed the night before. Now, as you might imagine, me coming to this conclusion as an 8-year-old was a good sign that I had a lot of other shit going on at the time. And I wasn't in the best environment. But the way I was raised to believe in God was that God was a lot like a bear trap. Something sharp, something strong to protect you from what's hiding out there in the dark. But if you played with it, it'd take a chunk out of you. I'd play with God. When I prayed the night before, I gave him a choice, alive or dead. He chose dead. Took a chunk out of me. And as I put miles and decades between me and that awful moment, intellectually, I grasped that I didn't actually kill my dad by praying the wrong way. But emotionally, there was still this guilt in the shape of that scared little boy. And no matter what I told him about depression, no matter what I told him about how hard it can be to stop someone from completing a suicide, that little boy would tell me, "You killed your dad." I told him about my new sense of faith, one that was more personal compass, less personal maiming device. Little boy said, "You killed your dad." I spent several fucking $1,000s on therapy, which did unfuck me up in a lot of very helpful ways. But it didn't stop that little boy from saying, "You killed your dad." So in my early 30s, I made some calls, went out looking for somebody who could tell me something that would absolve me. And one early Saturday morning, I got up, took 2 trains and a plane to Nashville, drove another hour out to the rolling hills of Middle Tennessee, and met up with my father's best friend at the ranch house where he'd retired since leaving Alabama. My father's best friend was a preacher, and he's the same preacher who brought my dad to God, same preacher who preached over his grave at his funeral. And the first thing that preacher tells me is, "Now, Nick, you might be worried that your dad is in hell because he was a suicide, but I've been talking to people, and I've been praying on it, and I've been thinking about it, and your dad's in heaven because he didn't really kill himself because he had him a break, and that was another person who killed him." And I wasn't worried about that at all. I really wasn't. New sense of faith, I had worked that out a while before. But I got the feeling it helped him, and I thanked him for it because it's never bad to hear your loved ones aren't roasting in hell. What can I say? and we went to go get some fried chicken. We got back to his house, and he starts telling me about the day my dad went missing. Well, Nick, you know, we were actually the first ones your mama called when your dad was gone, and we actually had to call the rescue squad to go out looking for him. And I went over there while they were hunting for him, and I was comforting your mama, but then I needed me a break, so I stepped out there while it was still light out, and I was standing there in the sun by the ambulance when they radioed in and said that they found your daddy and he was dead. And he keeps talking, but I don't hear him. I don't hear him because inside me is the loudest silence I've ever felt, heard anything. Because that little boy's quiet, because he realizes if it was light when they found my father dead and dark when I said my prayer, ain't a whole lot of good that prayer could have done to keep my dad alive. But the preacher, he's still talking, and he tells me, yeah, and after she got the news, your mama told me that your daddy, things weren't going his way. He'd say, one of these days, I'm going to go out in them woods, take a rope with me, and kill myself. She just thought it was a joke. And in that space that just opened up comes this immense sadness. And I don't know what to do with it, but I just know it's strong. It's so strong I feel it in the tips of my fingers. But there's a preacher there, so I think maybe he has some ideas about what to do and how to think about this. And I tell him that no matter what I hear, I still feel like I'm responsible for my dad somehow responsible for him. Well, Nick, that's just a trick of the devil. What you got to do is you got to pray with an open heart. Don't pray with a closed heart now. You got to pray that God will show you that your daddy just had him a break, and that was someone else who killed your daddy. And he'll give you peace. And again, I thought this helped him more than it helped me. And he goes on like that for a bit, and I politely make my goodbyes, and he prays over me, and I leave. So there's not really a playbook for dealing with an afternoon like that. Maybe there's a BuzzFeed article, 10 things to do about learning surprising facts about your dad's suicide. If any of y'all got the link, shoot it to me. I sure could use it still. But what I did is I drove back to Nashville, picked me up a mound of hot chicken, went to my hotel room, and nuked my taste buds to Valhalla. And as my tongue cooled and my belly swelled, that sadness washed over me again. I didn't feel like I'd killed my dad anymore. No, what I felt was grief. Grief that I thought would pass in time, but just this strong grief that when he was crying for help, no one knew what my dad was saying. And that's a big feeling for a 32-year-old. So I gave it to God. I put my two thick knees down on the hotel floor, put my face in my hands, and I opened my heart as wide as I could, and I prayed, Heavenly Father, please give me peace for my dad's death. And then I got up, and I waited. Thank you.